Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. College hoops is now 4 days away. The season in college hoops starts this coming Monday. Okay. By the way, drop your college hoops thoughts in the chat. We'll get to some of them to wrap the show. But I'll say this is that college hoops is coming. I want to give my official picks. You know, there's never a perfect time to do it. The season starts on Monday. We got election day Tuesday. So I don't even know how much we're going to talk about it next week. But what's crazy about the college hoops thing is it always just feels like it sneaks up on you. And then I want to do a preseason pick segment, but you know, the Sunday show, there's so much college football to react to. It'll be the same this coming Sunday. So I want to just give my picks, put them out there. And you can make fun of me throughout the season. And I'll give my Final Four national championship picks in a minute. But what I want to do is just spend half a second talking about some of the other teams, some of the other programs in college basketball, and just kind of give you some superlatives going into the year. First of all, I want to start with my two most intriguing teams coming into the year. And when I say intriguing, what I mean is two teams that I don't necessarily believe are going to win the national championship, but I think are going to be fun to watch. I think they're probably a little bit undervalued, underrated coming into the year. Those two teams are Kentucky and St. John's. And with Kentucky, listen, no, we've talked a ton about Kentucky this offseason. You don't need me to tell you. But listen, I just think they're so undervalued coming into the season. It's crazy to me. Even now, I see people saying, Kentucky stinks. And are they even going to be a top 25 team? I'm like, and this is people in the media. I'm not talking about, Louisville fans or Tennessee fans. I'm talking people in the media. It's like, I don't know if Kentucky's a top 25 team. What are you talking about? 4 players who averaged double figures in the Power 5 last year. The best defensive guard in the portal. Shout out Lamont Butler was on this show this week. Best defensive big in the portal. Amari Williams. He's a little bit banged up. They got so much shooting. And listen, I know that they're not going to be defined by exhibition wins against Kentucky Wesleyan and Minnesota State. But Minnesota State is the defending D2 champ. That's a better team than certainly a lot of Division I teams coming into the year. Those wins mean something. They're going to be able to shoot the crap out of the ball. I think they're better than people realize. I think they're going to make a fascinating game about a week from now when they play Duke. And then my other intriguing team is St. John's, because it's easy to forget, St. John's last year, by the end of the year, they were playing, I don't want to say as well as anybody, but I say it all the time. So they were 14-12 end of the season. They get hot at the end of the regular season. They go to the Big East tournament. They played UConn tougher in the Big East tournament than anybody did in the NCAA tournament, Big East tournament, anybody in March. So Pitino is in year 2 and brought in Kadari Richmond from Seton Hall, one of the top transfers in the country. And I'll say this, I do think there's a little bit of St. John's fans are ready. We've been waiting. We've been patient. We've been waiting 20 years just to win an NCAA tournament game. This is going to be the year. I think you could argue they're maybe the second best team in the Big East. I'd probably give Marquette a slight edge over them, but I think St. John's is going to be competing at the top of that conference, and they are a fascinating team for me to watch. The team that I'm most uncertain about coming into the year, the Arizona Wildcats. And if you follow this show, if you listen to this show, I love what Tommy Lloyd's done. I respect the hell out of it. Was in Vegas for the final Pac-12 tournament. Me and producer Matt had a lot of fun with a lot of the Arizona beat writers. Shout out to Mike Luke, good friend of mine, Jason Shear. Those guys are great at what they do. Here's where my thought comes in on Arizona. Tommy Lloyd's been awesome. 2 Pac-12 regular season titles, 2 Pac-12 tournament titles. That graphic looks great, by the way. Producer Matt, great stuff there. But, with Arizona, what stands out to me is this. Tommy Lloyd as a coach, they've been really good. It's almost counterintuitive to what you would think. Is in the regular season, you'd think, okay, they played in the Pac-12. It wasn't a very good conference, whatever. And you would think, okay, maybe they struggle in the out of conference, and then they blitz through the Pac-12 and they go, 18-2 or whatever in Pac-12 play. That hasn't really been who they've been. They've been really good in the out of conference. Remember, last year they won at Duke. Year before they won the Maui Invitational. they've been really good in the out of conference. And it's kind of been the conference games where they just take weird losses. Last year, they lost at Stanford. Stanford ended up firing their coach. Last year, they lost to Oregon State. Oregon State was terrible. And where my concern comes in, you can't do that in the Big 12. You can't take nights off in the Big 12 like Arizona has had under Tommy Lloyd. You do that, that one loss to Oregon State might become like a 1-3 stretch over 4 games because there's so many good teams in this league. So listen, I still think I have them as a top 10 team. Caleb Love, KJ Lewis, Jaden Bradley, maybe the best backcourt in college basketball. But I just need to see that consistency for 4 or 5 months. Listen, everybody has an off game. Everybody has an off week. But I do worry. Like if you were asking me, the Big 12 is loaded at the top. Kansas, Houston, Baylor, Iowa State, all in the top 10. Who's the team that maybe could fall a few spots lower than expected? Arizona would be the team. Talent is there. They got to show up to play every night. Really quickly, my 3 most underrated teams coming into the year, they are BYU, Louisville, and the USC Trojans. Okay, so bottom line is this: is a couple thoughts on each. First of all, BYU played an exhibition on Wednesday night. Excuse me, it was during the Dodgers game. 16,000 people were at that game. A quick shout out to them. I saw it was a great crowd. I've mentioned it before, by the way. Going to my first game at BYU this year. Cannot wait. I'll be there for the Kansas game in February. But here's what you need to know about that game. 18 3-pointers made for BYU. That's 50%. 24 assists on 32 made baskets. And I've told you about Yegor Demin, the 6'8" point guard from Russia, who's probably going to be a lottery pick. What I do think is underrated about BYU, and I've talked about this consistently, is that with BYU, remember, they have 4 guys coming back from last year's NCAA tournament team. And so I think we get caught up with all these coaching changes. But look, Arkansas returns 1 player from last year's final team. Coach Muss at USC, which we're going to get to in a second, returns, I believe, 1 scholarship player. Mark Pope inherited 0 players from John Calipari. BYU has 4 players who played for an NCAA tournament team last year that was a fringe top 25 team. They've added 2 likely first-rounders in Cannon Catchings and Yegor Demin, a couple other nice pieces out of the portal. I know I'm going to miss a name or 2, but Mawat Mag is a really good wing from Rutgers. Really like who BYU is. USC, really quick, I'll just say it. I have them as a fringe top 25 team, and I saw they were picked to finish tied for 12th in the new Big Ten. Let me just say this. Has anyone besides you been paying attention to Eric Musselman? Eric Musselman ain't going to finish 12th in the Big Ten. And I know last year at Arkansas, it ended bad, whatever. Yeah, what about the previous 3 years? They were awesome for his first 4 years. Year 1, there was a lot of injuries. They were still, 7th, 8th team in the league. Then they had 3 years where they were really good. So I just don't buy that they're not going to be good. Desmond Claude, my Connecticut kid, he's from New Haven originally, about an hour from where I grew up. He is USC's star. Also worth noting, by the way, Chibuzo Agbo is really good. St. Thomas is really good as well. But they also, by the way, won a charity exhibition against Gonzaga last weekend. So this is a team that is already kind of proving like, hey, picked to finish 12th in the Big Ten. Now, I will say schedule is going to be tough with the travel. I mean, we're seeing the impact of the east to west travel in football. All these teams struggling when they travel east. All these teams struggling when they travel west. But Eric Musselman's too good. They're not finishing 12th in that conference. Stop it. I think USC is going to be probably a top 4, top 5 team in the Big Ten, and I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. Speaking of make the NCAA tournament, whenever I say anything positive about Kentucky, what ends up happening? I got a million Louisville fans in my mentions. Torres, you hate Louisville. Blah. No, I don't. I think I was as pro-Louisville as anybody in the college basketball media in the offseason. Pat Kelsey, first of all, he's a winner everywhere he goes. He's won at 2 different stops, at Winthrop and then at Charleston over the last couple of years. And you look at the roster he's built, I think it's got actually a lot of vibes about similar to Kentucky. Don't have like those true like NBA difference-making type players, but he put together a deep roster. They took like 53s in their first exhibition, which is crazy. Took like 53s in their first exhibition. And I just think they got a lot of good veteran college players on that team. Chucky Hepburn from Wisconsin, Terrence Edwards from James Madison, Keyshawn Pryor from USF. That is a team that is going to be a problem in the ACC. good thing specifically for Louisville. The ACC, once you get past Duke and Carolina, is really, 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 there's a lot of question marks. I think there's a clear top 4 in the ACC after, with Duke and Carolina. I'd put Wake Forest right there, and then I would put Louisville right there as well. They're, to me, a top, probably 30 team in college basketball, and I think they're going to pick up a lot of wins against the middle and bottom of the ACC. Really quickly, going to get to my final 4 picks in a second. I don't have like a national player of the year. I just think nobody really stands out. And I think, a lot of times it's the player that's been in college for 2 or 3 years that kind of has the breakout year out of nowhere. Zach Edey a few years ago, whatever. And so I'm not going to sit here and lie. Cooper Flagg was kind of the first one that kind of came to mind. But it's just, I don't think there's an obvious one. I think UConn, there's going to be guys that split votes there. Mark Sears, I think that Alabama team is too talented for him to put up the stats he did a year ago. Arkansas is kind of the same way. You go on and on down the list. So probably Cooper Flagg, maybe RJ Davis at Carolina. No real strong opinions, so I wasn't going to lie about that. Really quickly, how about we get to my final 4 national championship picks? And I know it's going to piss some people off, so just be ready. My final 4 in college basketball, 2025. I've thought about this a lot, and I know people are going to get mad at one of the picks. My final 4 is as follows. UConn, don't think people are going to get mad at that. Arkansas, yeah, we'll discuss. Alabama and Houston, okay? And so my final 4, let me explain why that is my final 4. So let's go to Arkansas. That's the obvious one. Torres, you're a Cal defender. Da-da-da-da-da. Here's what I would say. 1, with Cal, we have to remember he has had 2 very bad tournament losses surrounded by 2 very good seasons, okay? We can just talk about what happened with the Oakland game last year. I get it. It was a bad loss. It was time for everybody to move on. But he looks relaxed, and what we can't forget about the Oakland situation is that Kentucky was coming off of a regular season in which they finished second in the toughest SEC ever, in which they beat Tennessee, which made the Elite Eight and was the SEC regular season champ at Tennessee the final week of the regular season, in which they destroyed Alabama at home. Alabama makes the Final Four, in which they destroyed Auburn at Auburn, and Auburn won the SEC tournament title. So the Oakland loss is inexcusable, but they beat the SEC tournament champ, the SEC regular season champ, and a Final Four participant in the final month of the season. Cal has not forgotten how to coach. I actually like how the pieces on this team fit together. And I'll just take it a step further with Cal as well. Is 1, I think the pressure to some degree is off. Now, Arkansas fans, I'm not saying he's coasting or whatever, but the last couple of years at Kentucky, he looked miserable. And I think he could feel the weight of those NCAA tournament shortcomings. The fan base believes in him. The fan base for now loves him. And also what I would say, the pieces fit nicely. And what I would add too, I think it's easy to forget this. There are 3 players on that roster that played for him last year. So you look at all these coaches that have gone to different places, whatever. Pat Kelsey, completely new roster. Kevin Young is new to BYU. Mark Pope, completely new roster. Cal has 3 guys in DJ Wagner, Adu Thiero, and Big Z who have played for him, who know what he's about, who knows his strengths, who knows his weaknesses. And if you watch that exhibition against Kansas, probably 2 of the 3 best players on the floor were Big Z and DJ Wagner. Boogie Fland was awesome as well. So I think Arkansas is going to make the Final Four. Really do. Not trying to get clicks. I'm just telling you how I honestly feel. UConn, to me, it's a no-brainer. Listen, Dan Hurley said it in the offseason, and I tend to agree with him, is like, we should be getting more of the benefit of the doubt. In other words, we should be the preseason number 1 team. There should be no doubt about it. And what I would say to Dan Hurley is, if you look at his roster, I don't think there's anyone, if Dan Hurley wasn't the coach of that team, UConn would be in the top 25. I don't know that they would necessarily be ranked in the top 5. So I think it's a credit to Dan Hurley. Watch them practice a few weeks ago when I was up in stores. I was sworn to secrecy, but what I'll tell you is this. I think the offense is going to be really good, but it's going to be tough. I mean, you got to remember, UConn, yes, last year they replaced 3 key players. They lost 4 players who were all drafted off last year's team. So our buddy Hassan Diarra is going to be the point guard. I think Liam McNeely and Alex Caravan are going to be 2 really good wing players. But are you going to get the same production from the 5 spot, from Samson Johnson, from Terrace Reed? I don't know. And by the way, this sounds like I'm being super negative on UConn. I'm just trying to present the counter argument. But the counter argument to the counter argument is that they still got Dan Hurley as a coach. They still have probably one of the 15 most talented rosters, maybe 10 most talented rosters in college basketball. And I'll tell you this, I've been to a million college practices. I haven't seen anybody practice as hard. So that edge, that chip, Dan Hurley said at Big East Media Days, he said, I'm coaching this team harder than ever because the standard that the last two teams have set, I need to let this team know that they need to live up to that standard. So UConn, I don't think they're going to drop off at all. I don't think, they got some big early season games. They got Gonzaga on a neutral. They got Baylor at home. They're going to Maui. So we're going to find out quick. But I think what people are going to find out quick, UConn ain't falling off anytime soon. Final two, Final Four teams. Alabama's number 2 in the preseason polls. I've said it a lot. Deepest team in college basketball, 2 of everything. The Cliff Omoyori commitment. He's the transfer from Rutgers. I don't think you can undersell it. I watched half a minute of Alabama's exhibition game against Memphis the other night. Didn't watch a ton because they were missing about 3 key players. No Grant Nelson, no Chris Youngblood, no, who was the third guy? Latrell Wrightsell. So I didn't want to watch it and then overreact to it. But the one thing I will say, you can see the impact that Cliff Omoyori has, 7-footer, transfer from Rutgers. Mark Sears is back, preseason All-American, preseason SEC Player of the Year. I still go back to talking to the UConn guys in the locker room after last year's Final Four. They were like, we have not faced a guard that good all season long. So he's back. Grant Nelson's back. Jaron Stevenson's back. And I do think that Alabama will be a Final Four team. And then I think Houston. Listen, Houston has been good for so long. They really a team that has had some weird tournament luck. I mean, remember last year, easy to forget. They were a number 1 seed. They are playing Duke in the Sweet 16. They're winning the game. And Jamal Shead, who ended up being a second-round pick of the Toronto Raptors, goes down with an injury. If they beat Duke, they're playing an 11-seed North Carolina to go to the Final Four. And so, or North Carolina State, to go to the Final Four. So they were really close there. They obviously had been to an Elite Eight back in 2022. They went to a Final Four in 2021. I think this is the year they get back to the Final Four. Yes, they lost Jamal Shead. They basically bring back everybody else. LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, Juwan Roberts, Javier Francis was hurt to end last season. He's back. And also think it's kind of worth noting, added Milos Uzan out of the transfer portal. Think it's kind of interesting. A couple things. One, with Houston, they destroyed Texas A&M in a charity exhibition. Texas A&M is a preseason top 25 team. So that kind of shows you where they are. And I think, 2, I'm not a huge advanced analytics guy. I think I always say with analytics, they tell a story. I think too often we let analytics tell the whole story. But it is worth noting, basically every advanced analytics site has Houston as the number 1 team in the country. So I don't think they're going anywhere. I think this is, I don't want to say it's the best version that Kelvin Sampson has had, but I think it's a good version. And my official national championship pick, I'll tell you this. I actually like Houston to win the national championship this year. I just think I am playing Alabama. When you have been knocking on the door for as long as Houston has been, at some point you're just going to break through. I've just been watching this sport long enough. I've been watching sports long enough. Listen, I think a good example, the Dodgers. Dodgers have been in the mix every year for like 15 years. They did win the Bubble World Championship, but they've been in the mix every single year. You knew they were going to break through with fans in the stands, whatever. And I just think it's Houston's time. They've been on the cusp. They've been great. I've said this about Houston a bunch. I don't think people appreciate them going into the Big 12, the toughest conference in college basketball, and just kicking the crap out of everybody. Remember last year, they lost their first 2 games of Big 12 play. And then I think their only other loss the rest of the Big 12 was at Kansas, a place that nobody wins. UConn didn't win there last year. Houston didn't win there last year, whatever. And so I think they're as good of a program as there is right now. They're right up there with UConn. They're right up there with Bama. My official national championship pick is Houston over Bama. For everybody who says I'm a UConn homer, I think they're good. I think there are other teams that are better this year. Dan Hurley, by the way, if you need me to clip that off for motivation, just let me know. Happy to do it for you. But yeah, Houston over Alabama is my national championship pick, and my Final Four is UConn and Arkansas as well. And do see the first anti-Calipari tweet coming in. It says, how many years has Cal been picked to win and come up short? It's a fair question. but I've done my Calipari take, man. Listen, he's not perfect, but I think he's got returning players, veteran roster, and I got Arkansas, UConn, Houston, Alabama in the Final Four, with Houston beating Alabama for the title.